Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hey there, lovely radicals. It's Merritt here. How's your pre-Christmas mood? Mine's mediocre. I'm not built for the cold and dark season. I guess I never was, but this year we seem to be getting a pretty tough winter, as it started to get really cold pretty early already, like in October, and it feels like this winter thing has been going on forever already, but it hasn't. And I can't even think about how long it'll be until the next t-shirt wearing season. But hey, I'll try and roll with the punches, as we do. And this week, dear ones, I just want you to know that you're not alone if you're feeling kind of subpar and non-Olympic. Maybe it's recovery, maybe the season, maybe the loneliness that usually takes hold of me this time of year. Maybe it's just my incomprehensible brain chemistry, who knows. But anyway, I'm very happy to have you here. As you know, you are the ones that make this podcasting adventure worthwhile. And it is so good to be virtually connected to so many of you. And if you want to show this program some love, you can do that in different ways. One of which is if you leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. That would greatly help the podcast to reach more people, because I don't know if you know, iTunes wants the good reviews to keep coming, or else they'll just rank everyone else higher than you, and then the podcast just won't be found, because there are, like, I heard 350,000, I think, podcasts on iTunes. Haha. Yeah, well, so it's pretty hard to get ranked higher at all. And considering that so many of those 350,000 podcasts are weight loss and lifestyle and diet shows, it is hard for a body positive message to even be found, even though I personally think that this is a much more profound message and one that really helps people reconnect to their true selves. So that's why it always helps when listeners leave good reviews on iTunes, and it's not really an ego thing of the hosts, because every body positive podcast should be flooded with good reviews anyway. Not for us hosts, but really for the others who would otherwise lose themselves in some diet and body negativity rabbit hole, just as many of us did for much too long. So who knows? Your review might just be a small step for you, but a giant leap for womankind. And the other way of helping the cause is to help me personally to keep up this work, as it takes very much of my time and money to produce the show. And it sometimes does overwhelm me, I have to say. So if you want to support me, you could do that by becoming a Patreon of Life Unrestricted. You can make small repeat contributions to the show on the support platform called Patreon. Might want to check that out. I have a site there. You can find it at patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. That's patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. Without the Patreons of this show, it probably wouldn't exist anymore. So I can't even properly express my gratitude to those of you who have become Patreons. So it's easy to jump on board if you want at patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. In this episode of the podcast, you're going to hear Lauren Anton from Culver City, California. Lauren is a registered dietitian nutritionist and certified personal trainer specializing in eating disorder and sports nutrition. She's the owner of Arrive Nutrition Movement Life. She has years of experience at eating disorder treatment facilities in most levels of care, from residential to intensive outpatient treatment, and she helps people who struggle with weight, food, and exercise. Her goal is to assist her clients in moving away from this punitive experience with food and movement to one of self-compassion and self-care. And she does that with a non-diet health at every size approach. Lauren has spoken at numerous national conferences and events on eating disorder and sports nutrition. Lauren and I had an acoustically somewhat stormy Skype connection, so please excuse the reoccurring background humming and just enjoy Lauren. The first thing I asked her was what her childhood memories are of having and living in a body.
Actually, the thought that came to mind, the memory, was when I was like 3 years old. I was sitting next to my mom, and I put my hand on her belly, and I said, "Why is yours soft and mine's hard?" And she said, "Well, because I had you." And, as I was thinking about doing this podcast with you, I thought, gosh, there's so many things I want to talk about with your audience. And I think a big one is just the season of life changes that happen to your body and that we need to be in acceptance of, childbirth being one of them, allowing for the body to birth a human being. The body goes through quite a bit during that. And that very, very early memory of me and my mom together, I even get kind of emotional even thinking about it. And honestly, I didn't think of it until you asked that question. So it's kind of neat that it sprang to my mind. So that's a very early memory I have.
Did it make you feel bad about your own body?
I'm so glad you asked that. The neat thing is I felt super neutral. Okay, so when I was 3, I was very neutral. I was neutral about my mom's body. I was neutral about my body, really. And I see that in my son. He's super neutral. He does not judge weight of any sort, judge body types. He doesn't do that. He hasn't learned that yet. So I love that memory because it's a memory of having zero judgment. And and my mom was active and, she was the type of person that she put dinner on the table every night. She was a stay-at-home mom. She baked cookies. I had a homemade cake almost every birthday. A lot of celebrating with food. My family's from Chicago, and my dad is Italian-Irish descent. My mom's Mexican-Spanish descent. And, I would say I grew up sort of a Chicago version of Italian. My mom learned all the dishes and just all the fun Italian cookies over the holidays. We're kind of moving into Christmas right now, and there'll be all the little kind of, like I say, like weird Italian cookies, the ones with anise in them. And
yes, I love them.
Right? Yeah, good. Oh, see, there you go.
The crunchy ones, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So good.
And so a lot of like celebration around food. So that was the social aspect and the cultural aspect of food and the family aspect of food, like, sitting together at the end of the day, eating was very, very important to our family. So that was sort of my early memories of food. My mom, when I went to kindergarten, she said, "Yeah, I was all excited to give you an afternoon snack, and then you just didn't eat your dinner, though. So I stopped giving you an afternoon snack." And I was not allowed to snack eventually. So that, I think, I don't repeat that. I take the family meals for my family, but I definitely allow for like some snacks. I do take an Ellen Satter view of that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ellen Satter, but she has the great division of responsibility. I guess I'll say it for, maybe people listening who don't know, but
please do.
Definitely look her up, guys. It's Ellyn Satter, Satter. She's wonderful. She has great books out there that I highly suggest. But she has a concept called division of responsibility, where the parents decide what they're eating, where they're eating, and when. And the child gets to decide how much and whether or not. And I think that's a really great way to, avoid a clean the plate or one last bite syndromes that, at least here in America, are really prevalent. And I definitely grew up with that. I definitely was someone who grew up having to eat the veggies, except for, and notably, and this is hilarious, my mom would serve canned peas. Those should be stricken from the earth, in my opinion. That's on definitely my dislike list. I they're like gray orbs of awfulness. And and I was like, just like, I'm not eating these. And my dad suddenly says, no, she doesn't have to eat them. And I look at him. I'm like 4 or 5 at this point, and I look at him like, oh my God, you are the best. And he goes, I don't like them either, so we're not eating them. So anyway, those are some early memories, and just sort of kind of how the food was growing up. So there was like no snacking eventually because my mom wanted me to finish my dinner.
I think everybody has heard this, like, don't ruin your appetite, don't eat now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And in my home, it was that so many foods weren't even there. So when you talked about Ellen Satter's way of, who decides what, I was like, like my mom only fed me like pumpernickel and spinach and a half a grapefruit in the morning. I'm like, yeah, thanks. I don't want to have a lot of that. You know what I mean? So it's also wise to mention that parents should provide, a lot of different stuff and also fun foods. So that would be a prerequisite to what you said about Ellen Satter.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
Otherwise, the health nuts would probably only feed their children raw vegetables or something.
Oh, yeah, no. In kids, I'm not speaking as a dietitian right now. There's a reason why kids gravitate towards sweeter foods. One, it's a protective mechanism, just evolution, just looking at it from an evolutionary lens. Sweet things are typically not poisonous. So that's sort of something we've developed as human beings to, stay alive. And then also they need that sort of rich sources of food because they're growing. To deny a kid a variety of foods, including ones that happen to be sweet, is actually kind of bucking up against something that they're kind of primed to do. Your appetite and your taste will change over time naturally, so you don't even have to worry about it. You don't even have to try to control it. Your body does all that for you. It's actually amazing when you start to listen to your body.
And when you're deprived of those foods at home, then you just, I can only speak for myself. I went to all of the people I could and kind of indulged there and had sleepovers, and all I was interested was their fun food. And I was amazed at their cupboards, and I could stand there and like, hello friends, can I eat you, all of you? And at home there was nothing. So that kind of set me up for having this binge mentality that kind of gravitates toward, where's the food? I'm there, because I didn't have it. So I didn't realize that until people started telling me the mechanisms of deprivation and binging and the preoccupation with food, that it became so obvious. But as a kid, you don't really realize it, and you sort of feel strange, odd, not like the other people, because you're so fixated on food, and for the others, it's just what they bring to school and have for a snack. And you're like, I would give you my clothes for this piece of candy.
Oh my God, you'll give them your clothes. That's awesome. You know what? I have to share, as you're speaking, it's reminding me, like, okay, so I don't know when the shift happened, but my mom, she would make my lunches, and it would be a sandwich and some piece of fruit. And I would sit there and look at people's, the ding-dongs are what I really wanted. I wanted a ding-dong, Merritt, and there were no ding-dongs in my house. My mom had some fun food for sure, but like that sort of stuff she didn't send me to school with because, and actually in first grade, this is why, she had a reason for everything. She did her best, because I was really energetic. My sister, who is an educator now, she said, actually, I think you were bored. When you talk about it, you were not stimulated enough. Your reading level was a little higher. They probably should have broken out the kids who were at a higher reading level. I was definitely energetic, and she was like, she wanted to actually put me on a pill, the teacher, and she told my mom, hey, I think she's hyperactive. You need to put her on Ritalin. And my mom was like, over my dead body. In my mom's mind, she said, well, they had just given you, Lauren, a cupcake and red punch and then wanted you to sit. And you're the type of kid that if you eat, you move. So that was her 1+1 = 2. Actually, studies have shown that sugar doesn't cause like a big rush, but that's how she saw it. And so she started to be like, okay, you can have that cupcake, but like after school and run around. So I think what happened is my mom didn't want to give me, combined with, I don't want to give you a snack because I want you to eat your dinner. Oh, you have this hyperactivity thing. Not diagnosed or anything, just like the teacher was impatient with me. And so my mom didn't give me sugar, anything like a ding dong, for example, or a Twinkie. And I didn't get that because my mom didn't want me running around the classroom like a top. So that's what she felt I would do. So again, I'm going to say studies have not corroborated that. I want everyone to understand that, but that's how my mom thought, and she was just doing her best. So when you're talking about like going to other people's houses and being like, oh my goodness. And also I would trade. So I always tell parents this, your kid's trading at school. Everyone did it, not just me. But I would full on anyone. And then the kids who were used to getting ding dongs, they sometimes ate them, sometimes didn't. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I am eating that, even if I was full, which I remember being hungry a lot. Like I needed a little more, at lunch, more than the sandwich and the piece of fruit, which I wasn't into the fruit, by the way. I was always like, ugh. And, and I wanted the ding dong because I knew I couldn't have it. And so anyone who didn't want to eat that ding dong, I was eating it. And as I got older, especially as 12, 13, 14, I remember going over to friends' houses and overeating there. And, they wouldn't be because they're used to having all that food around. Also, that was when, 13, 14 especially, that's when my friends were starting to be aware of dieting and oh, I don't want to eat that. I don't want to get fat.
Do you remember diet talk at school?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Or thin body talk, oh, that person's fat. And they would say it in a derogatory way. And being thin was prized. And I was kind of like a medium build. But in my class, a lot of little athletes and a lot of dancers. And I was kind of not. At that point, I made myself be an athlete. It started as early as 5th grade at the school sports. And now everyone had been in soccer for years. I would bring home the flyer. My mom would be like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, nope. I wanted to play piano. I wanted to read. And that was pretty much it. And, maybe ride my bike outside. I did not want to go play, run around after a ball and play soccer. That sounded like the worst possible thing. Also at school, kickball. And I was the kid picked last on the kickball team. I remember, they would sit there and argue about, I don't want her on my team. She sucks.
Yeah, and I had that in all of all of the gym classes, all of the sports, everywhere. No, we don't want her. It was so traumatizing. I was just not athletic. Yeah, and everybody and I was not cool. I wasn't cool at all. It was totally not
cool. Oh my God. Yeah, no, oh my God. I am so glad you had the same experience. I'm sorry you had the same experience, but it makes me feel less alone. Yeah. And I ended up playing with this girl who happened to have asthma and really couldn't play very much sports because she had very acute asthma. And we played this game called Mystery, which was essentially like a scavenger hunt game. And so we stopped playing, kickball entirely. I couldn't even take it. So fast forward, that was first, second, third, or, second and third grade actually. And then
but it was nothing with your body. You felt okay about your body back then?
Yeah, you're jogging my memory. When I was in second grade, I'm having a lot of discoveries with you, Merritt. Thank you for this.
You're welcome.
Right? So in second grade, I stopped growing and I got a little chubby. Now I look back and I can see in my life an out and up growth pattern. I was just I just wasn't skinny anymore. And so I kind of got a round cheeks. And if I look back at the pictures, I look pretty cute. And I was in my little, communion dress, one of the bigger girls in the class and also one of the tallest at that point. So I remember my parents, I think my doctor had said something about it, but all I remember is my dad said something about something about either my eating or my food or my weight. My mom sent me upstairs and she kind of read him the riot act about it. It's a very, very hazy memory for me. So that's kind of what happened. But I remember being aware at that point that I was fat. It's funny, though, if you look back very objectively, I just look like a little girl.
Yeah, that's what we all say.
Yeah, I just kind of looked like a little kid. Some of the kids were thinner, some of the kids were bigger, some of the kids were in between, and everyone kind of changed over time. But I was just kind of like, it just wasn't a big deal. I think doctors, though, scare families is the point.
Yes.
And I've definitely seen that in my treatment of eating disorders where, someone, starts restricting, and I'll see anorexia in the absence of underweight, where they're exhibiting all the medical issues, but they're not. Their weight is like, oh, well, you're fine. So the doctor doesn't see anything. In the meantime, this person's lost their period, their hair is falling out, they're kind of faint, they're not eating. The
happens
relationship
with adults as well.
And 100% happens with every single age.
Mm-hmm. Only a very small percentage is recognized because they look visibly emaciated, but that's only a very small percentage.
Yeah, I mean, there's so often people who are just starving, but because their weight culturally doesn't reflect it, based on our bogus system of BMI, they think, oh, no, you're fine. It's actually not a good weight for them. Look at the behaviors. That's why I'm health at every size to the end. I don't stop focusing in on your weight, on the gravitational pull of the earth on your body, on your mass. It's just a statistic. I don't even know what to call it. It's neither here nor there. It's about your behaviors. How are you respecting your body? That's really what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. Every single time it's going to come down to that. Oh, okay, so when you didn't eat and when you were, freaking out over the food or when you binged in response to all that. I know so many people, that's how they end up binging. They don't eat all day or they eat very little, they eat quote unquote perfectly, and then they let loose at night. And that's very common. It's very human. When you deprive yourself, as you said earlier, it results in that sort of, like, we both experience this, that it results in that, oh my gosh, all I want is a ding dong because I can't have it, So, yeah, so that's when I first had bad body image, I guess you would call it, or I felt bad about my body, was when I was about 8 years old. It's funny because, like, when I was 10, I'd already kind of shot up and I was back to sort of a medium build, It was just an out and up growth pattern. In fact, my son actually, I want to say this for all the moms out there who have to contend with, sometimes just errant comments, maybe even innocuous comments from the doctor or just an observation and then they take it to heart. So I went to my son's 4-year appointment last month and he's sitting in there playing, in his underwear because she was doing the exam and he's playing like he's reading. And she goes, oh, I see here that he shot up a lot in weight and, just kind of, and then didn't grow. And I said, oh, you know what, actually last year, and the only reason why I can do this is because I just know my stuff on this. So, and other people won't, and they'll sit there and listen to the doctor and be like, oh shoot, my kid's going to get diabetes. That's always what they think. So I said, oh yeah, he shot up in weight. Okay, well, actually, if you look back at his records from last year, the doctor was actually saying he didn't shoot up enough in weight. And she then proceeded to ask, hey, well, how's his eating? And I said, oh, it's pretty typical preschooler. Sometimes he eats dinner, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he'll eat only the potatoes, and another day he ate like a bowl of kale. It was the weirdest thing. Some days he eats the oatmeal, other days he wants the waffle. He just like really varies. Sometimes he wants the juice box, other days he doesn't. And she said, okay, so he's kind of regular. She goes, you know what, don't worry about it. So that was the year prior at his 3-year appointment. So I recalled that for the doctor at the 4-year appointment. And I said, I'm wondering if he's kind of having some, he didn't gain enough weight last year, kind of fell off his growth curve, and now he's shot up a little. I'm thinking that this is just a little bit of a growth pattern. I think it's an out and up growth pattern. I know my husband had it. I know I had it. I know my son seems to be exhibiting that because at 10 months old, he kind of got this cute, chubby look and then suddenly thinned out a couple months later. And she goes, oh, okay, yeah, you know what? That's probably it. And so that was the end of the conversation, but only because I knew. I look at the trajectory over the lifespan, and his lifespan is only 4 years. I also look at his parents. me and my husband. And I knew not to sit there and go, oh, he gained too much weight? Oh, well, therefore I need to restrict all his food. And then, oh, wait, then cause his weight to actually be higher than it would be, because his body will go into, quote unquote, starvation mode and start holding on to things. So I just, you just got to be savvy and actually let the child grow. Let the child grow. So it's so important.
So how were your teenage years then, when your girlfriends talked about diets all the time and being thin?
When I hit puberty, Merritt, I hit it like a Mack truck into a brick wall. It was so epic. It was in between 7th and 8th grade. I gained a significant amount of weight because my body just changed overnight. I have literally had the same sort of body since. I went from being a kid to a woman in 3 months. And I had stretch marks on my hips, and they were deep, deep purple. I had stretch marks on my inner thighs. It was, to me, it was just awful. I was also on a swim team, and I was, again, I just have to say this. If you saw me then, you'd think I looked like a regular teenager. Okay, yeah, she looks like 13. I had these stretch marks going, but no one really commented on them. My mom commented on them. I was obviously the most concerned about them. I think my mom may have mentioned them once, like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like, in terms of that's it. But for me, it was like as if a beacon were shining on it. And then also all my clothes stopped fitting. And my mom would say, like, it still fits, you look fine. But, the waistband would be so tight. In the 80s, it was the smallest weights and like a lot of room in the seat and the thighs. And I was like the precise opposite body type. And so it would be like a purple mark around my waist, way too much room in the seat and the thighs. Geez, that sucked. It was it was asphyxiating. To this day, I don't like tight things around my waist.
Neither do I.
It's really super painful. If I could live in yoga pants, I would.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really formative. I think, like I said, in athletics were so prized. So I kind of interrupted my thought earlier, but to go back to it, when I was in 5th grade, that's when the school sports started, and I didn't like to. As I said, my early foray into athletics in terms of kickball didn't go so well, but I wanted to, I like being social and I wanted to join the team. So I joined volleyball. Well, I couldn't play, and everyone was like, I don't know how, but they were like already like volleyball stars. I'm like, how is everyone so good? And I'm not. So I remember practicing serving in my backyard. We had a pool in our backyard, and I would practice serving it over the pool. There was a lot of times where I had to fish the ball out. I would do this. I think I did it over the summer, actually. And finally, I became a really good server. I just sort of forced myself to get good at athletics, and the sports at that time were volleyball, basketball, and softball. I was kind of mediocre at best, and until we hit track in my 7th and 8th grade years, I was one of the very few people who could run the mile at like kind of a fast clip. And people, I remember starting to get compliments for the first time athletically, like, whoa, you're fast. Wow. Especially from boys. That was really impressive, to be athletic, to be fast, to be good. Being smart, that was a given. Everyone was smart. Just because I got good grades, that wasn't good enough. You have to also be an athlete. And I was like, this is it. I'm a runner. And I joined the cross country team in my freshman year in high school. And I was on it all 4 years, including track too. And, I would literally cry on the way to practice because it was so painful. I remember having knee pains. And eventually, though, my sophomore year, I remember my friend said, it worked. She goes, Lauren, you're fast. You can keep up with us. She goes, keep up with varsity. Because I would come in like 20 minutes after everyone. And I kept up. And that's how I learned to push through just to push through pretty large discomfort. That was the beginning of me just sort of not knowing, when people are like, oh, does that feel good? I mean, I had to stop 50 feet into a race if I stopped feeling good. So it's interesting working with athletes. It's real tough to tell them stop when it feels bad, because they're required to push through pretty intense, discomfort. So I ran all throughout high school, and I was a larger runner. Again, Merritt, I just want to say, if you looked at pictures of me, I just look like a regular teenager, like the quote unquote normal body type. Because I want to reflect too that I've never had to walk through life in, a higher weight body in the way that people who are actually in higher weight bodies have to. So when they talk about thin privilege, it's an interesting thing for me to hear that, because I'm like, gosh, I know when people look at me that I'm not in a higher weight body just because of the people I was around, a lot of athletes. I don't know, being in California, I don't know. It was just a lot of just concern. I kind of lost my train of thought because there was a big bang outside. I hope you didn't hear that. But this is what I was saying, and it's an important point. It's interesting because I was considered a larger runner. My nickname was actually Roby for robust. They were just like, Lauren, you're a big runner, but you're good, And that's another thing is with sports, there's like certain body types that are sort of prized in different sports. With running, a thin body, thinner the better, is in order. But my whole thing is, look, the athlete's going to either be good or not. Don't focus in on their weight. Focus in on what they're actually doing. So that way you can get a wider diversity in terms of body type, because you don't want to sit there and force someone to be in a thinner body when if they are in a thinner body, guess what? Their times are going to get worse because they won't be in a healthy body for them. So I just want to make that point.
So you were spared an eating disorder, or you didn't fall into exercise addiction? You were strong enough to resist all that?
When I was in high school, kind of in the later years, my mom actually got a job or she would be out of the house. So I would come home from school, and this is very bingey. I would eat for like an hour and a half straight, like all the foods that I thought I couldn't eat, like the snacks, that there was ice cream, chips, cookies, cheese, that sort of stuff. I would eat it, and then I would stop at 4 because I had to stop at 4 to do practice. That's straight up binge behavior. Then I would run. By the way, I would eat so much that practice was really uncomfortable sometimes. I would have like a lot of acid reflux because of it, like a lot of heartburn. I'd be like, oh my God, it was pretty bad. So I would try to adjust, but it's still the definite overeating. I would just sort of let loose around food. Also, something I did on and off was definitely dieting in high school. I would have notebooks full of, I learned in a fitness magazine, how to count carbohydrate, protein, fat, calculate the percentages, and then calculate the calories. And my family, when they saw this, they just thought, oh, she's so smart and diligent. She's so healthy. They didn't think like, gee, that's sort of obsessed. Because I had this sort of straight up binge behavior going on. And anytime my mom left the house, I would be like, oh, let's go downstairs. I just go and run downstairs and eat all the food I could until she came back. And again, I just wonder, I have to repeat this, if she would have even cared, I probably could have just gone down and had a snack and been normal about it, but not in my head. That was a theme, like in the isolation, the excitement of it, then the guilt, and then the resulting notebooks full of calculations of ridiculousness. And then going on weird, like self-prescribed diets where I would restrict, I'll just say that. I would still eat, but the meals would be ridiculously small when I felt like I was getting like too fat. I would just like look at myself and be like, yuck. And it was all based on the way I was treating my body, like just like a rag, binge, then expect to run, after that, then diet down. It was just ridiculous. And then in college, I continued running and, just at the first year, this is actually when it got pretty bad. I was running so much that, it was a Division I team I was running for in college. All of us freshmen ran together. I upped my miles from 15 miles a week to 50, and it was off the chain. I was so injured. And I didn't say anything to the coach. I didn't say, hey, yeah, I dogged it all summer and only ran 15 miles a week, so this is killing me. I instead, ran through pretty bad injuries. I mean, there was a time where I was walking across the arts quad and I felt like my heel sort of came off and I saw spots. I mean, I had an Achilles heel major injury. I don't even know what it was because I never got it looked at because I didn't want to get it looked at. I was out and running, 2 weeks later. I would wake up in the morning, step out of bed, and fall because I couldn't even walk.
Did you do that for weight loss?
No. See, and this is the point I want to make about athletes. It's all about I wanted to be a really good runner. So to be a really good runner, yeah, there was a little bit of like, those runners. Oh, the runners on varsity are really skinny. Okay, But then it just wasn't about necessarily, it wasn't weight loss per se. It wasn't, I want to have a certain body. It's, I want to be an awesome runner. So what happened, because my nutrition was terrible, I think all sports teams should have a dietitian. My school did not have that. And I was having horrible, intense gastric pain, abdominal pain, with the intense running. I would be like curled up on the side of the road after a mile. And the girls on the team, by the way, this one girl had anorexia. In retrospect, she told me, just eat Jell-O all day. I'm here to tell everyone that made everything 100% worse. And so what happened was I would try not to eat because I was like, oh God, I don't want to get sick before I run. But then you end up binging at night just out of sheer need of the body needing sustenance. I ended up getting, I lost my period and I got so injured that I had to stop running. And that was a major identity loss for me. I'd run for 5 years at that point, and it was devastating. But I wasn't allowed to join the team because I had nerve damage, I had tendonitis, and my doctor looked at me and he was, you got to stop. You got to give it a rest. And so that was the end of that. That's when I had probably bad body image because I didn't know, it was kind of stemming from a loss of identity, also not being as active as I was used to, and just having all of that kind of come to roost. So it was pretty serious. That was definitely an issue. I mean, years later, but I remember saying to someone, one of the coaches, I was like, is there such a thing as exercise addiction? I'm not kidding, Merritt. And he looked at me like, what? And I'm like, I just think that could be a thing. Like you could just not be able to stop. Because I was seeing it in myself and I was seeing it in like the people running with me. They were obsessed, And it was just interesting. I thought that it was like a whole new concept. And then I go to school to become a dietitian and, specialize in eating disorders in sports, nutrition. And I was like, oh my God, no, there's like extensive literature on this. Not extensive, but it's a thing.
Totally.
So, right. So
Did any doctor put two and two together with the absence of menstruation and your exercise?
No, because I guess my body was super resilient, and the minute I got injured, later that month I got my period. Because
you rested?
Yep. Here's the thing with my body. It does this. It says, oh, hell no, you will not be doing that. And, and it just gets injured. If I push it even too hard now, like I work too hard or something, I'll just get vertigo. I'm not kidding. That's the new thing. So my body just says, oh, you're not going to push too hard. It's interesting how the body will just take care of itself sometimes. Not all the time, but at least
sadly, not all the time at all. So, I mean, after I started talking about my struggles, a lot of people reached out to me, and I was quite shocked that there are so many women out there at all ages who just, like me, have lost their periods. And just like in my case, no one told them how this is directly connected to too much exercise and restricting food.
Yes.
I mean, even I kept getting the advice. I got the advice like 2 months ago or something from my doctor to go back on the birth control pill, which is ridiculous.
Oh, that's stupid, doctor.
Yeah, it strikes me as the epitome of absurdity because this only produces an artificial period. and actually masks the problem. So I really don't want to miss a chance to hear a professional talk about the cause and effect of the absence of menstruation. So the hypothalamic amenorrhea, how they call it. How do you approach your clients who are afflicted with it?
Nutrition and cessation of exercise until they can, here's my thing. I'm a fan of physical activity. It's actually part of treatment when possible to normalize it. Cause I'll have clients on all ends of the spectrum, from I don't want to ever do any physical activity ever again in my life to, that's all I do. It's my way of coping. It's my way of de-stressing, and it's my identity. So here's my deal. If you are not injured, if you are eating enough to sustain your level of activity, if you enjoy it, and if you're able to still maintain social interaction, i.e., social and work obligations. You're not skipping out on work to go exercise. You're able to hang out with friends and just have a cup of coffee. It doesn't always have to be a hike, that sort of thing.
Take a rest day.
Yeah, you're able to take a rest. But if you're able, and I'm going to say this again, if you're able to eat enough to support your level of activity and you're not injured, those are the two biggies, and you're enjoying it, dang, go on. But here's the deal. When it gets bad, it's real obvious. Oh, you're injured. It's the first sign of, of things going wrong. You're not eating enough. And with an athlete, you can just point to times. You can point to performance. Your performance is in the crapper because you're not eating.
What I mean is the other people, the hundreds of women that I know that just say they don't have menstruation and they don't want to stop exercising. They can't stop exercising.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, that's the axis dysregulation, the hypothalamic dysregulation, if you will. I don't know if I'm butchering the words here, but it cannot heal itself. It's not ever going to heal unless people stop it, but no one tells them that. And still, if they get told this, they resist it.
Yeah, that's the whole thing is, working to sort of with a therapist, because I'm not a therapist. So with a therapist, you got to get underneath what is driving them to need to do this. What are the underpinnings of the eating disorder? And then working to slowly increase, as they're able. So if I'm working with someone in a facility, I worked for years in treatment programs, you're raising their meal plan and they're using supplements. And it's kind of pretty intense. Anyone who's been through a treatment program will tell you that. On an outpatient basis, though, when they're, I'm seeing them maybe once or twice a week, you're working with them in capacities such as, okay, so I try to get them to see how do you, what are you feeling? What are the physical sensations? And then validating them. Yeah, you're going to feel good after, or at least partially during that, say they're out running on nothing, or injured. At some point, though, how does it feel? So I walk through I'll walk through behaviors detailed, like a binge or even purge behavior. So when, walk through that binge, walk through the over-exercising, step by moment, and over time, they will be able to find that point where it's not fun anymore for them. It's not that fun's a terrible word, but it's not doing it for them. Whatever that it is, whether it's de-stressing, euphoria, getting that sort of dopamine response from their behaviors, right? So seeing when the payoff isn't there anymore and being able to take a pause at the very least. And my whole thing is the more you can lengthen that pause, the better. They also need support from their loved ones. Some of them do have that, some of them don't. A lot of them have to hit a rock bottom and have things kind of fall away. Loss of relationships, loss of health, loss of work, opportunities, career opportunities. So those sorts of things, where they're hitting that rock bottom and they're ready. But yeah, there are people out there who cling to these behaviors because they're getting a payoff from them, and it's getting them to see there are cons to this. Yes, of course there are pros, but there are major cons. And how is that affecting your life? And at some point, for many people, they are able to say, you know what, the pros, even if the list on the pros is like a page long, the cons will be so bad that they see, over time. It's not like suddenly. And again,
that's
this is
the
with
problem, yeah.
Right. No,
and it's subtly.
Yeah, it's very slow. It's over time, and they have to see how this is not working for them anymore. Sometimes it's like with my clients who want to have kids, I want to be able to have a kid. I want to be able to have a relationship. Like, what is your eating disorder taking from you?
It's taking life. That's the problem. But it's taking it so slowly that you're kind of sacrificing bit by bit by bit and more until you're left with nothing
Right.
but
And so
lose.
finding out like what is it taking? And I'm impressed with my clients every time I meet with them. They are able to see, oh, it's taking my sleep from me. It's taking the ability to have a stable relationship. It's taking serenity from me. And they'll get really specific. I can't be present for my kids. I'm passing this on to my kids. I have, lifelong injury. So I hear this.
Bone loss,
I hear this.
fatigue.
Bone, yeah. And then bone loss even, for some people is like, sort of like a nebulous, like they don't even realize they have bone loss until it's bad. And then they're aching all over the place. That's what, oh my God, my wrists are hurting. Just everything hurts. So, it's taking, it's adding to my depression. It's adding to my anxiety. And it's also experimenting. Even if they have one day of like, okay, I didn't engage in, XYZ behavior, and seeing the difference and talking about it too. Like, hey, when you don't engage in behaviors, you may have an uptick of anxiety. You may have an uptick of depression because you're not engaging in your coping mechanism. What can you do instead of giving them other things, to rely on that for them? And it's going to be different from person to person. Some of them have like family members that they rely on. Some of them have friends, not necessarily that they're having a process with, but like, hey, how are you? Some of them get very into meditation. And also, eventually, I'm very encouraging of, intuitive movement, like what feels good. When they're able to actually engage in physical activity, when they're nourishing themselves enough, what actually feels good. A lot of times they have to take a break from their activity of, that was big in their eating disorder. But what I see a lot of is way more variety. And that is in the physical activity, and it's also in the food. Way more variety.
What I see is that it's just speaking from my own experience and coming from a background of complex trauma. I know that running from painful emotions can become all-consuming and so habitual that I often don't recognize that this is what's going on. So because we see it modeled in our society that we should always chase the good feeling, and we're being told that there's eternal happiness to be achieved somewhere around some corner, mostly titled thin or something related.
Or so like a major athlete body.
Yeah. So we try our damnedest to outrun what haunts us. And once we see that this running from emotions cause a lot more pain, and that at one point we are better off facing our demons, we get scared. So I see it in a lot of women. They know that they should stop. They know that fear is going to come up. But as soon as the anxiety comes up, they're back on their elliptical because it feels like it's never going to end. And it feels like I'm not going to get out of this. So how do you tell them to just sit with that and that it will pass? Does it get easier? I think people are waiting for the moment when it's not going to feel as bad and then I'm going to do it. But if I understand correctly, it's never going to feel good not to exercise when you have a problem with it or to start eating more when you have a problem with that. It's just, when are you going to face it? When are you strong enough to face that? Or when are you weak enough to face the demons?
Yeah, I think definitely I'll frame it to clients like, we're going to have an experiment. I have a lot of clients who, once they make a decision, it's amazing how, people with eating disorders are strong people. And when they tap into that strength, they're able to make a decision and be like, okay, I'm going to try this. I had a client make a decision. Like, I've had many clients actually make a decision to be like, okay, I'm going to not purge this specified amount of time. Like, it might be a weekend, it might be a day, it might be an evening. And practicing and having like little distractions and safeguards and usually some sort of plan, a game plan in terms of, okay, here's how the evening is going to go, for example. if someone chose like, okay, I'm not going to purge this Friday, and kind of having the day, sort of planned, having safety things going on in terms of whatever works for them. Usually knowing what their general schedule is going to be like and having it be on a day where they're going to be less triggered. And so sitting with the urges, and even if they end up like purging anyway, for example, in this example I'm giving, the fact that they waited and were aware is the practice in and of itself. The fact that they didn't go from urge to action in the split second, instead going from urge to, okay, I'm going to try to sit with it. Oh my God, the anxiety is horrible. And maybe they wait like those 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes are gold. And I'll tell them that, like, that's the nugget we're going to build. We're going to build on that. And you can say the same thing for any, like, binging, over-exercising.
Yeah, but with exercise, they can always lie to themselves and say, come on, exercise is healthy. I'm going to do it anyway.
Oh, you can lie to yourself about any of those behaviors and justify any of them. I've heard all the justifications. Mm-hmm. You can sit there and point out to them, or not point out and say, how is it not working for you? Again, go to that, like, where are the cons here? So, okay, you lost your period. All right, you're injured. There's always going to be some sort of unhealth, like dis-ease. There's always going to be some sort of thing that isn't healthy that's going on for them. It could be, I can't hang out with my friends because I had to get my 20-mile run in or whatever. That sort of loss is what to start to quantify and point out. And they will point it out. Even the most hardcore people who are like, no, this is totally working for me. Well, and I'm like, look, I'm not asking you to give up right now. Let's bring it out on the table. What's not working about this? And every time they are able to point it out. Because when I take out that I'm not going to take this from you, they eventually will see how it's not working for them. Or they'll, and again, Merit, a lot of them need to hit a very serious rock bottom. Mm-hmm. It might be a hospitalization. It might be, where the electrolytes are off. It might be a massive injury that ends their whatever athletic career. It might be a loss of a job, a loss of a relationship. And I'm actually thinking of clients as I say this. That big kind of bottoming out is often a big motivator for them to be like, things aren't working. And also, Merit, if someone's walking into my office, I mean, this is the advantage I have. When they walk into my office, they're not walking in there because everything's going great. They're walking in there because they have an issue. They know it on a level.
And what do you think the eating disorder or the exercise addiction or both is masking? Or as I see it in my own therapy, as much as I want to make it about weight and as it feels like it is about the weight, like, yeah, but I don't want to gain weight or I don't want to gain more weight. And it really feels as if this was the main problem. But I keep finding out that this whole weight stuff is only masking deeper stuff. And how do you deal with that with your clients? Do you find that's true?
Oh, yeah. It's never about the food or the weight. That's the surface. And again, I'm going to say just that speaking as a dietitian, when I work with someone with an eating disorder, I'm working with a therapist. So we work together in terms of, the therapist is kind of addressing the underlying issues. It could be, like you said, trauma, some sort of whatever perceived trauma they have, any trauma, whatever they perceived as, was less than nurturing to them. It could be a major trauma. It could be a big T and little t trauma, however you want it, all the things I've heard, but whatever was less than nurturing to them can be, internalized as traumatic, whether it's rape, abuse, or whether it's, physical or verbal abuse, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be that. And it could be an identity piece, like I was mentioning before. I mentioned that on purpose. It wasn't about getting, a thin body, and often isn't per se, but there's something about the identity piece, and I see this in athletes and non-athletes. This is my identity. I have a lot of people who are in restrictive eating disorders who are like, I was always known as the girl with the thin body. I don't want to lose that. So finding out, okay, what does that thin body mean? And when you hear that, and when you hear someone kind of reflect on that, you'll hear, well, people like me better. I'm more acceptable. Just people like me. It's all about acceptance.
They feel safer.
Yeah. Especially if there's been weight commentary in the house. So keeping their body small is a way to kind of garner approval. And the reasons are as different as the people who have eating disorders.
Yeah, how did your own obsession start to ease up after you realized what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I never got to any sort of low weight where people tend to take notice only when people are in low weights.
Yeah, sadly.
Right? So it was just massive injury and discovering just it wasn't accomplishing anything. And I just had to, over the years, like kind of move out of it. And also seeing other people that I perceived as obsessed was actually helpful. I was like, wow, that's really obsessed. Oh. So that sort of thing was helpful to see examples of both healthy relationships with your healthy relationship with your body and an unhealthy relationship with your body.
And what happened to your body after you stopped either over-exercising or trying to restrict food?
Nothing.
Interesting.
It is interesting. Like I'm telling you, I've always I was saying that on purpose. I was a bigger runner. I wasn't like the lower body weight runner. I was considered a larger runner, even though in the grand scheme of life, I'm not in a higher weight body, and nothing happened. Remember I said before, my body just stays the same. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how hard I try to either lose weight or change my body shape, whatever, if manipulate my body in some way, nothing happens. And I've definitely had clients like that. And I definitely feel their frustration because it's like my body is betraying me, and I think a lot of people with eating disorders feel that, especially in the restoration process. My body's betraying me. My body's betraying me. And that was something that was just interesting to notice, like all that effort, all that, everything, and nothing really happened. But for me, it was more about having an athletic identity that I had become. And remember, Merritt, it really kind of, if you want to get all like back in the day, and kind of what's the underpinnings, why do you have this need to have an athlete persona? For me, it was, oh man, I was so teased for being not an athlete. You can't kick the ball, you're not on this team, and being shunned. So it's all about, I wanted to be strong, I wanted to be untouchable, and I wanted to be better than everyone else.
So how did you overcome this?
Yeah, it was just, I didn't need that identity anymore. I had other things. It was just like, I don't actually need to do this anymore. I don't need to be a certain body type. I don't need to be an athlete. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't seem to be as easy for all of the people that I know.
Well,
they have to gain more weight, or they have a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to disappoint. But it was also, if you take it in total, an over 20-year by myself struggle. So I didn't get the attention of others because, my weight always stayed sort of the same. Nothing ever happened. When I got injured, my body bounced back. So I also, that sort of futility, I mean, it didn't matter what I did. So, I guess you could say, wow, lucky, because it didn't work. You know what? Honestly, Merritt, had suddenly lost like a lot of weight and, suddenly was like an amazing athlete and things started to kind of pay off, at least in the short term. Yeah, you know what? It would have been harder for me to get out of it. But it was just like no payoff. Wow, all this obsession, no payoff. I'm not a star athlete. I don't have a model body, depending on what stage of the bad body image I was in. I don't know if I would have been diagnosed with a clinical eating disorder, although some people would have, especially the binging and then exercising and then restricting. I definitely treat clients like that and tell them they have an eating disorder. So, but yeah, it just, also it could have been a lot shorter had I recognized the issue and, attempted to get help. Instead, it was years and years and years of futility, bad body image, and then coming slowly again over years to the realization, wow, this is just spinning a wheel over and over and over again.
If there was something you would advise us all to stop doing, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, like one thing? I have a list, Merritt. Stop obsessing over the shape of your body. I think would be probably the most blanket important thing I can say. It is futile. It will not advance you in the long term. It takes things from you. You get into relationships that are poor because they're based on this. Because a lot of people will lose relationships because they were poor to begin with, because they were based on this sort of facade of I look this way and I think this way about my body. It just is not worth it. And from a female perspective, it's just blatant misogyny.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's important for people to recognize that as well, because it helps. Because we are surrounded by these messages, and when we are tempted to believe them, then we're stuck in this pattern. And when we recognize what's going on and what the driver of these messages is and how we have been duped for all these decades, then it gets easier to kind of, step up and say, not me anymore, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's just, wow, this is really useless. Mm-hmm. Wow, look at all this energy I'm wasting on nothing. On, for me, I'll speak personally, for being injured. That has taken major things from me. I have lasting injury. Mm-hmm. Lasting. That's a major, major lasting issue that I will have for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it reminds us.
Yeah. So for me, there you go. There's your answer, Merritt. That's how I got out of it. Being super chronically injured, chronic pain.
So it takes a certain rock bottom for most people. Shit.
Yes, and I've been saying that. So sorry. I know. I'm. Don't kill the messenger.
Yeah, but it's so sad. It makes me so sad because I see people on the verge of totally breaking down and risking chronic injuries or, just wasting their life, and they just haven't quite hit rock bottom yet, and they refuse to stop it. So it's sad.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think podcasts like yours help.
Thanks.
Because they see a different reality. I think because you know what it is? I think as a society, we don't see a different reality. No. Because you said it earlier, right? You said, oh, well, the exercise is like really healthy. Dieting is healthy. Being careful with your eating, eating clean, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it.
It's all everywhere.
Dieting. It's all dieting. Different versions of dieting. It's all, it has this kind of whitewash of, oh, that's healthy. And presenting people with a different reality. Like, my story is but one story. And, my clients are each, they're in and of their own selves, their own stories. You just using my own story, the more stories that are told that tell a different reality, putting to light, people have not heard of health at every size. It's so basic. It's so getting back to basics. It's how am I treating myself with respect? Mm-hmm. My weight it just is very, very as simple and as profound and as difficult as that.
Yeah, it just saddens me to see that even I am often stubborn enough to risk it all, to just keep doing what I'm doing because I'm such a scaredy cat. I'm just afraid of changing stuff. And then people can talk about hitting rock bottom, and I'm sort of like irrationally believing that this is not happening to me. And then it had to happen, of course, until I kind of wisened up and got humble and said, there are no different rules for me here. And now I want to talk to others, but I fear that they're not hearing me, just as I didn't listen until it all kind of went to shitters, you know what I mean?
See, and there you go. It had to go to shitters.
Yeah, but I don't want it to have to happen to so many people, really. I mean, we have a choice to wake up without everything having gone to shitters.
We do, and that's where I think hearing a different reality is helpful, and that's why I said that. Like, it is about hearing a different reality, and also the more people that hear, the messages that this podcast puts out, honestly, the more that everyone's going to have like shifts in thinking, so that they can not hit a serious rock bottom. I don't want that for anyone. Because I worked in facility, treatment centers for years. Yeah, you're seeing people like not at their best. They're most vulnerable. And when they walk through my office, you're seeing them in various stages. Especially because it's outpatient. I don't want anyone to have to hit rock bottom. So that's why I said, yeah, hell yeah, let's put this message out there so that someone can learn before it gets bad for them. So someone can learn to be like, whoa, that like the scales fall from their eyes and they see reality,
Mm-hmm.
It's just be like, this is not working. This is not worth it. And I want to work on, even though it's going to be hard work, just because you make a decision, hey, this isn't working, doesn't mean like suddenly everything falls into line.
Sadly, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And working on it. And sometimes it takes years, but then that person's able to function a lot better. They're able to be a functioning member of society while they are working on themselves. So I don't want this to be kind of gloom, doom, bleak.
No, not at all. It's just that, we have a life and we are free to seize it now or tomorrow, but we are free to seize it. So, and we've been led to believe that we're not free to seize it until we are better or until we are thinner or until we are, I don't know, whatever, until we are busier or younger
or have
whatever
a career, of that whatever caliber or whatever. Yeah, I so hear you. Yeah.
So tell me, how can people find out about you as of this very moment? You don't really have your website up yet, but it's going to be up very soon.
Yes. So arrivenutrition.com, and that's ARRIVE nutrition.com. Yeah.
I'm probably the first person to link to your website in the show notes, because I'm hoping that once it gets out that people can find it.
Oh, yes.
So my last question to you is, what would you like to be remembered for?
I think for my passionate, I have a passion for helping people, and my passionate care and love for others in terms of guiding them and helping them see their own path to a life of freedom.
Great. Thank you for your time, Lauren. It's been a great discussion.
Thanks. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak, Mary. It was a complete honor.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome, make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.